August 13, 2018. A father stands in front of news cameras, tears streaming down his face. His wife and 2 little girls are missing. He begs for their safe return. His voice cracks with emotion. But behind those tears was a monster. Within 72 hours, the world would discover the horrifying truth about what really happened inside the home at 2825 Saratoga Trail. And the man crying on television? He knew exactly where they were. This is the Chris Watts case. Frederick, Colorado, a quiet suburban town where families felt safe, where children played in manicured yards and neighbors waved to each other in the morning. On August 13, 2018, that illusion shattered. Shanann Watts, 34 years old and 15 weeks pregnant, vanished along with her 2 daughters, 4-year-old Bella, 3-year-old Celeste, gone without a trace. But this wasn't a stranger abduction. This wasn't a random act of violence. The person responsible was the last person anyone suspected. From the outside, the Watts family looked perfect. Chris Watts, 33, worked as an operator at an oil field. Shanann was a devoted mother who shared her life on social media. Their daughters, Bella and Celeste, were bright-eyed little girls who called their father Daddy and trusted him completely. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Chris had started an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger. He told her he was separated. He told her he was starting a new life. He painted himself as a man ready to move on. The problem? His family didn't know. They were part of the past he wanted to erase. Financial stress weighed on the marriage. Arguments became more frequent. And in Chris Watts' mind, a dark solution began to take shape. He didn't want a divorce. He didn't want custody battles or child support. He wanted them gone. Early morning, August 13, 2018. Shanann had just returned from a business trip. She was exhausted, pregnant, ready to sleep in her own bed. Chris was waiting in the darkness of their home. He strangled his wife, the woman he had once promised to love and protect, the mother of his children. She fought, but he didn't stop. Shanann Watts died in her own bedroom, but the horror didn't end there. Bella and Celeste were still asleep down the hall. Chris had already tried once that night to smother them in their beds. They had woken up, so he stopped. He waited. Now, with their mother dead, he woke them. He told them they were going for a ride. Maybe they rubbed their eyes, confused. Maybe they asked for mommy. He loaded their mother's body into his truck. He loaded his 2 little girls into the back seat, and he drove 45 minutes. That's how long the drive was to the remote oil site where he worked. 45 minutes where Bella and Celeste sat in the truck, not knowing their mother was already gone, not knowing what was about to happen to them. At the Anadarko petroleum site, in the isolation of the oil fields, Chris Watts finished what he started. He smothered Bella. He smothered Celeste, his own daughters. Then came the disposal. Shanann was buried in a shallow grave near the oil tanks. But for Bella and Celeste, he chose something even more unthinkable. He submerged their small bodies inside crude oil tanks, separate tanks, alone in the darkness. Chris Watts then drove to work as if it were a normal day. By noon that same day, something was already wrong. Nicole Atkinson, Shannon's close friend, couldn't reach her. Shanann had missed a doctor's appointment. She wasn't answering texts or calls. This wasn't like her. Nicole drove to the Watts home. She called Chris at work. He claimed he didn't know where they were, said they had just vanished. But Nicole wasn't convinced. She called the police. When officers arrived, they found Shannon's car in the garage. Her purse was inside, her keys, her phone, and most telling of all, her medication for lupus. Shanann would never leave without it. The house was too perfect, too staged. Something felt off. Within hours, the case escalated. The FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined the search. Endangered person alerts went out across the state. And Chris Watts, he agreed to go on television. He stood in front of cameras, playing the role of a desperate husband. He said he just wanted them home. He said he missed them. His voice trembled. His words sounded rehearsed. The public believed him, but investigators didn't. On August 15th, just 2 days after the murders, they asked Chris to take a polygraph test. He failed badly. The machine didn't lie. Chris Watts knew exactly where his family was. He knew what had happened to them. When confronted, he asked to speak to his father privately. The conversation was recorded, and in that room, Chris finally broke. But even then, he lied. He admitted to killing Shanann, but claimed it was in a rage. He said he had asked for a divorce, and she had snapped. He said she killed the girls, and he killed her in retaliation. It was a calculated lie, an attempt to paint himself as a man who had lost control, not a man who had planned murder. Investigators didn't buy it. They pressed harder. Chris finally revealed the location. On August 16th, he led them to the oil site. GPS data from his work truck confirmed it. He had been there early in the morning, right after the murders. Recovery teams arrived. They found Shannon's body in the shallow grave. Then they opened the oil tanks. Bella, Celeste, submerged in crude oil. The investigators who worked that scene would later say it was one of the most disturbing recoveries they had ever conducted. Chris Watts was arrested on the spot. Chris Watts was charged with 9 felony counts, 5 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, 3 counts of tampering with a deceased body. Facing the death penalty, he made a choice. On November 6, 2018, he pleaded guilty to all charges. Shannon's family, the Urzacheks, had requested no more death. They didn't want a trial. They didn't want to relive the horror in front of a courtroom. On November 19, 2018, Judge Marcelo Kopkow delivered the sentence: 5 life terms without the possibility of parole, 3 to be served consecutively, plus 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shannon's pregnancy, plus 36 years for tampering with the bodies. The judge called it the most inhumane crime he had ever seen. Chris Watts would never leave prison, but the revelations didn't stop there. In February 2019, from his prison cell in Wisconsin, Chris gave another interview. This time, he told the truth, or at least a version closer to it. He admitted he had been planning the murders for weeks. He admitted he had tried to poison Shanann with OxyContin before strangling her. He admitted the children had woken up during his first attempt to kill them. The crime wasn't a moment of rage. It was cold, calculated, premeditated. Chris Watts had wanted a new life, and he was willing to erase his entire family to get it. The Watts family home in Frederick still stands, but it will never just be a house again. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, Nico. 4 lives stolen by the person who was supposed to protect them. The case became a global obsession. Documentaries, news specials, endless analysis. The world wanted to understand how a man could do this to his own family. But maybe that's the most terrifying part. There is no answer that makes sense. There is no explanation that brings comfort. Chris Watts looked like everyone's neighbor. He smiled in family photos. He played with his daughters. And then he killed them. Justice was served. Chris Watts will die in prison. But Shanann, Bella, and Celeste will never come home.